Welcome to Room Award, the podcast that explores the secrets of sleep and psychology. I'm your host, Ryan, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of sleep and other topics such as mental well-being and personal growth. If you want to unlock your full potential and receive the rewards that come with understanding the power of sleep, you're in the right place. To discover more tips and insights on improving your sleep and overall well-being, visit our website and explore our other episodes at roomaward.org. Hey everyone, today I'm joined with Dr. David Cunnington, a specialist sleep physician for over 2 decades, as well as the co-founder of the website Sleep Hub, which provides information on sleep and produces the monthly podcast Sleep Talk. Along with being a sleep physician, Dr. Cunnington is a sleep advocate and frequently appears in print, radio, TV, and online media as an expert commentator on sleep and is a regular national and international keynote speaker. Adding on to that, Dr. Cunnington has been a part of a range of research projects and has produced numerous journal articles, editorials, and book chapters. So, for my first question, can you just briefly introduce yourself and your work in sleep medicine?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for that introduction. As you said, I've been working in sleep medicine for a long period of time. I trained originally in Australia as a lung specialist. And as part of that, we train in sleep apnea and some fundamentals of sleep. But then I got really interested in sleep. So I actually came to the US, to Boston for a couple of years and was a sleep fellow at Harvard. And that's where I really caught the sleep bug and got really interested in sleep. And then since then, I've been back now in Australia about 20 years practicing in sleep medicine. And so my week consists of seeing people with a range of different sleep disorders, all manner of different things that occur with sleep. And I see young people and adolescents. I see busy working professionals. I see older people with other medical conditions that impact on sleep. So a whole range of different sleep things. And I'm also involved in clinical research as well as teaching and training other health professionals around sleep.
Great. And among those teenagers and children, what are the most prevalent sleep problems you see?
So particularly in teenagers and young adults, one of the really common things is the tending to a later sleeping time. So really still trying to go to bed at the same time, but really not feeling sleepy until later. And similarly, expecting to get up at the same time, but not really wanting to get up at the same time. Mm-hmm. So the underlying body clock drifting to a bit later problem or a bit later timing, sorry. And the second problem I see really commonly is trouble getting to sleep or trouble staying asleep related to anxiety. Because it's often a phase of life or a time of life when, the rubber hits the road. It's time to get real and there's real pressures and things that need to be done and then a lot to fit in to the day. So it can be hard if there's that sort of running on nervous energy, high expectation, lots of things to do to be able to wind down.
Right. And is there a certain reason why like young adolescents or adolescents in general have like a later sleep time?
So it's part biological and it's part social. So the biological part, I'm not entirely sure of the mechanism. There's a couple of theories and some evidence sort of for each of them. One is that it takes adolescents a bit longer to accumulate sleep debt or sleep drive, so that it may not be sleepy at the same time each night. It might take that bit longer to accumulate that sleepiness. Another theory is that the body clock becomes a bit longer during adolescence. So it takes a bit longer for people to, before they're ready to wake up the next morning. But yeah, definitely biological factors there. Then the social factors is day's just busier. There's a lot to fit in. And that's sort of where I was getting at. If you've got a lot to fit in and then, it gets to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and we can't just go to bed, turn the light out and say, like a machine, let's just turn off. There's got to be a bit of winding down time or a bit of time for everything to settle. So that'll also tend to just delay that time of getting to sleep.
Right. That's really interesting. And I know you mentioned a little bit of anxiety related to sleep in teenagers, like how maybe they feel like they need more sleep or they're not getting enough sleep. And do you have any mechanisms or a way of coping with this anxiety and developing a healthy relationship with sleep?
Yeah, it's really tricky because you've got to balance that conflict, I suppose, between got a lot to do and got a lot to fit in, but also need to create enough opportunity for sleep and some transition time as well. So one of the key ways to try to avoid that anxiety about sleep is really to get too obsessed about sleep. Sometimes we can try too hard to make sleep happen and get too caught up in I've got to make sleep perfect because the sleep isn't perfect. I'm not going to be able to function the next day. So here's my checklist of all the things I need to check off and all the things I've got to do to make sleep work absolutely perfectly. So that's a recipe for becoming more anxious about sleep.
Right.
We need to walk this fine line of having respect for sleep. So allocating an appropriate amount of time for it, having the right space, being in the right frame of mind when we get into bed, but then almost stepping back from that and saying, okay, I've done my bit. I'm in good physical and mental health. In fact, as a young adult or teenager, I'm in the sort of prime of my physical health. My body will self-regulate. It'll take the sleep it needs as long as I just do my bit and allocate the appropriate window of opportunity, and I'm in the right frame of mind when I get into bed. And so it's that delicate balance of respect, create the opportunity, but then being a bit ambivalent or a bit relaxed about what happens in that space. Also recognizing sleep's a bit of a variable beast. Some nights it'll be shorter and lighter and more awakenings and take a while to get to sleep. Other nights it'll be bang, I'm asleep, I'm out, don't know anything till the alarm goes. And so it is a little bit variable. So not really getting too wound up about this night to night variability and just, again, trusting I'm in good physical health. My body's going to take the sleep it needs as long as I create that opportunity.
Right. And I know you just mentioned how, nights can vary with lighter sleep or maybe having a little bit more trouble going to sleep. And I feel like a lot of teenagers maybe believe they have insomnia, especially with the later sleep times. So when it's not really insomnia. So what are some common misconceptions about insomnia and among adolescents, and how can these misconceptions be addressed?
Yeah, so you're right. One misconception is about insomnia, whereas really it's just a mismatch between sleep timing or expected sleep timing and where the underlying body clock is. An example of that is, let's just say the body clock's delayed or late by a couple of hours so that someone's not maybe feeling sleepy until midnight and maybe not feeling like they want to wake up until 9 a.m., but they got to be up at 6 to get the school bus at 7. And therefore they count back 9 hours and go, okay, well, I'll go to bed at 9 because my get up time is 6. They go to bed at 9, not feeling sleepy, and lay in bed going, come on, how come I'm not asleep yet? And then about 11:30, 12 start to feel sleepy and go off to sleep. So technically that's not really insomnia. It's just this mismatch between what we'd call a behavioral sleep pattern and a social schedule and the underlying biological schedule. So the underlying biological schedule might be in that 12 to 9 a.m. sort of pattern. The social schedule maybe got to be at school by 8 a.m. And then the behavioral schedule is trying to match the social schedule. So getting up at 6 a.m. to be on the bus at 7 a.m. to be at school by 8 a.m. And so all those schedules are misaligned. So sleep doesn't work in essence. So yeah, that's not really insomnia. It's just this misalignment of these different schedules. Largely set up by behavior and expectation. We think of insomnia more where people have created the right opportunity, it fits with their underlying body clock, but they either just can't get to sleep or just can't stay asleep. And that's impacting on daytime functioning. So quite often there's a mismatch too between people's expectation around sleep and the sleep they're actually getting, but they're functioning well during the day. So that's not insomnia either. That's just, again, this sort of a bit of a mismatch where the biological sort of sleep need they have might be different from the expectation. Another example of that might be someone might be allocating 9 hours for time in bed because they sort of feel like, okay, I'm supposed to get 8, so I'll allocate 9, allows a little bit of wiggle room in terms of getting enough sleep. But maybe they're just genetically someone who's a little on the short sleeper end of things, and maybe they only need 7. And so in that 9-hour window, they're going to have 2 hours of wakefulness because their particular sleep need is a little shorter than the population average. Now, they'll function well during the day, but they'll be awake for around 2 hours during the night, maybe at the start of the night, maybe during the night. But that's not insomnia either. It's this mismatch between sleep timing and sleep need. So yeah, insomnia's got to be that difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty staying asleep, and it's impacting on daytime function. Now, if people are getting that, so if people are getting that impact on daytime function, we'll get into this a bit, but, absolutely the place to start is with some of the self-help strategies and often sort of relaxation type of strategies, looking at your sleep timing. But pretty quickly, particularly in young adults, we want someone to be then seeking professional advice, because that insomnia, particularly at this phase of life, can escalate pretty quickly. Because as we talked about, stakes are high because people are busy, got a lot on, high expectation of what they're able to produce during the day. So it's not as if I want someone to have sleep problems that go on and on and on, and they try to deal with it, and it goes on, because that'll just exacerbate that underlying anxiety around sleep and make it harder to turn around and to get things better.
Right. And yeah, I think you mentioned it a little bit. So when should like an adolescent or their parents consider seeking help from a sleep specialist like yourself for sleep problems? Maybe with terms like our example, insomnia, or just any sleep problems in general.
Yeah, as a general rule, earlier than they do. Right. So the really common thing, and particularly for me in clinical practice, both in Australia and what I experienced in the US and what I know from my colleagues happens in the US, is people come after they've had trouble for a long period of time. And often, they're like, no, I should be able to sort it. And, it's funny. Sleep's a little bit like diet in that, there's the very strong feeling in the community that you should be able to fix it yourself. And if you can't fix it yourself, it's a failure of you. And so we think about sometimes the obesity sort of epidemic's a bit like that. Well, people are overweight because they just don't manage their diet. And therefore there's a bit of a stigma about people overweight seeking medical help and things. Sleep's a little bit the same. There's this bit of a societal expectation about, well, you should be able to fix it. You're doing all the wrong things. You should be doing this and you should be doing this. And so people get this, well, I haven't done everything. I haven't tried hard enough. I haven't been doing these other things. So they often come too late, because particularly around insomnia, it's a really funny thing. Once you've had trouble with sleep, you start to think differently about sleep and you start to behave differently around sleep. You sort of lose your sleep mojo. And then once you lost your sleep mojo, or you start to think and behave differently around sleep, that becomes a perpetuating factor. It essentially almost guarantees you're going to have more trouble with sleep. And it just grows and grows and grows over time. And so then people actually develop a sleep-specific anxiety, and that anxiety can then bleed out into other areas of life and become more generalized anxiety. And so that's why I much prefer people to come earlier rather than later, because often then the sort of stuff I need to do is more in the range of tweaks, changing behavior to get things back on track, rather than now I've got to manage anxiety, wait till anxiety settles, then I can start to address the sleep. It's far less I've got to unwind. Unfortunately, though, some real barriers to that is access to sleep specialists. Both in the US and Australia, generally, you got to get to us via a referral pathway. So you got to see your primary care physician first, and then go on to see a sleep specialist. You may not have a sleep specialist in your area, and so it may require a bit of travel, or that may be long waiting times to see people. So yeah, access is a real issue. But in general, in terms of sequence, I'd much prefer people absolutely try the self-help things, try the common sense things, but don't feel like you got to really flog them or just do them to death. If they're not working, that's the time pretty quickly to talk to your primary care practitioner about that and see, okay, what else might be going on? What else might we need to do? The other reason to do that is sleep's a bit of a barometer for physical and mental health, or canary in the coal mine. So sometimes people might think it's a sleep problem, but in actual fact, the disturbance of sleep is the first sort of clue that there's something else going on. And that's where your primary care practitioner, who knows you pretty well, you go and see them and say, look, I've tried all this, my sleep's not great. I go, yeah, okay, the sleep's off, but actually I think there's this other thing going on that's driving the sleep being off. So that's the other reason to sort of seek help earlier rather than later. Is, maybe the sleep's a sign or a symptom of something else. And sometimes you're trying to tackle it from the downstream end by trying to fix the sleep, and the thing that's upstream just keeps festering and getting worse and worse over time.
Is there like a common thing that causes like sleep issues that you see that like people think is like a sleep problem, but it's really from something else?
Yeah, to be honest, anxiety would be the most common thing. Because it's funny because we all run on a bit of nervous energy, right? It's nice.
Yeah.
It's got that vital sort of feeling. We feel like we can get things done, a bit of pep in our step, bit of nervous energy. So we all have this sort of little bit of edge of anxiety because it helps with productivity. And so it's a really fine line between that sort of little bit of an edge, running up good levels of nervous energy and pushing just that little bit too far. And often we can't see it. Those around us can see it, and they might be trying to tell us, "Are you okay? You're looking a bit frazzled," but we don't want to hear it. And so, it is often that would be the most common thing,
Right.
where the insomnia is, the canary in the coal mine for that.
Right. Okay. And just to clarify, what is the difference between a sleep doctor and a sleep specialist, and what should a person look for when searching for a sleep professional to help them?
Yeah. So in terms of, say, for a medical practitioner or other type of health disciplines, be it psychology or be it behavioral specialists, anyone can say they've got an interest in sleep and put up a sign and say, "Hey, I'm a sleep doctor," or "I'm a sleep psychologist," or that type of thing. In the US, there's the American Academy of Sleep Medicine that certifies sleep centers. So if you're looking for a center to go to that maybe's got physicians, psychologists, a whole team, so you can look for American Academy of Sleep Medicine accredited center. If you're looking for a physician, there's a board certification process in sleep medicine. So it's looking for someone who's board certified in sleep medicine. Similarly, in psychology or behavioral therapists, there's the diplomat of behavioral sleep medicine is a qualification for psychologists and behavioral therapists who are then expert in some of the strategies around improving sleep, such as cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So it's looking for someone who's got those credentials or a center that's accredited by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine.
Okay. Right. And I just had another question. I was just curious. So I know like a lot of like when people struggle with sleep, have you seen that maybe there's an impact with technology or like screens that cause that, or is that because I know this new age, of course, there's like screens that really affect everyone.
So I think it goes both ways. There's absolutely for some people that sort of constant scrolling, the distraction or the sort of dopamine hit you get from being online and the sites that really are trying to keep your eyeballs on the site and what's next, what's next, what's next, that type of thing can absolutely keep the brain very active and make it hard to switch off. And then there's also the effect of the light from the devices, which for some people can have an effect in delaying sleep onset or impacting on sleep. The counter to that, though, which I think doesn't get talked about enough, is that young people, in fact, older people as well, really none of us, are good at tolerating empty space. And by that, I mean just if I tell someone to just lie there in the dark with no phone, no nothing, no external stimulus, and just lie very still and quiet, that is damn hard to do because the brain will begin, "Oh, what about all this other stuff I need to be doing?" And we'll fidget and move and start to become very uncomfortable. And so when we're trying to go to sleep, in essence, that's what we're asking someone to do, is to just lay quietly in silence until you sort of start to drift off to sleep. And so for a lot of us, a distractor is really helpful in that space. So we go to bed, we're not necessarily ready to go to sleep. Some form of distraction to prevent that sort of escalation of the sort of internal thinking and that sort of fidgeting and frustration is often really helpful in helping us to settle. And that's unfortunately, for some people, the device is actually settling. It can provide that distraction, particularly if they're looking at it, "Oh, yeah, flick through this," and they start to feel sleepy, put the device down and go to sleep. So that's actually a good thing in terms of how the device is used. But then you've got the potential negative if the content's too stimulating or the light's having an effect. So it can be helpful and bad. Now, the ideal would be reading a long form book, right? But that's a bit more for people my age or, in fact, people 20 years older than me. Because, who reads long form these days?
Right.
It's really uncommon, or, it's more than 150 words, man, I'm onto the next thing. But the good thing about that sort of long form writing is it's very linear. It has a start, it just keeps on trucking along. It's not here, then here, then here, then over here, and then, it's not bright, shiny object all over the place. Very linear and very predictable. So does serve a purpose as both being a distractor, but not too stimulating, and you sort of know where it's going. And so, yeah, ideally, long form book would be the best distractor when you first go to bed and you're sort of just getting settled and waiting to feel sleepy. If you can do that, but a lot of us have lost the skill of reading long form. So, it's a good skill to try and cultivate.
I completely agree. And I guess this kind of goes into the play with that. I guess I don't know if everyone who's listening is aware with the term sleep hygiene, which is kind of just like ways of like winding down or kind of hygiene, or like, how there's oral hygiene, but hygiene related to sleep. So can you provide some like practical tips for students or a younger audience to establish some, I guess, good sleep hygiene habits, or just like ways of winding down in general? I know you mentioned the book, but just adding on to that.
Yeah, for sure. So again, sleep hygiene is an interesting thing. So it's sort of both good and bad. I alluded early on to the fact that we don't want that list to be too long, and we don't want it to be too prescriptive, because it can actually make people quite anxious about sleep. If you've got to get everything, this sense I've got to get everything perfect to be able to sleep, you can develop a sleep anxiety. I like to think of sleep hygiene as being respectful around sleep. So the list of things on sleep hygiene includes things like being careful about caffeine intake, and particularly caffeine later in the day, being careful about exercise and exercise timing, and not exercising too late in the day, not having alcohol or excessive amounts of alcohol, because that can impact on sleep, large meals too close to bedtime, having the right sort of place for sleep, somewhere that's quiet, that's dark, that's an appropriate place for sleep. So it's the common sense things that are just about respecting sleep. Or another way of thinking of it is not doing all the wrong things around sleep. But I need someone to get 50% on the sleep hygiene exam. I don't need them to get 100% on the sleep hygiene exam. So that's where I sort of think of it more as being respectful about sleep, not doing the wrong things, just, hey, be sensible about it, rather than feeling like, right, well, my sleep's not great, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to drill down. I'm going to absolutely nail everything and try and perfect sleep. That ain't it, because that's the way to become more anxious about sleep. And importantly, in some of the research we've done, particularly in cognitive behavior therapy around sleep, we've not shown sleep hygiene by itself is an effective strategy for insomnia. And yet, if we look at, often from a healthcare point of view, the most commonly disseminated information or advice on how to sleep is sleep hygiene information. So the information we're giving out is the stuff that actually hasn't been shown to work in a research sense. Now, it's important as part of a package that people have that respect for sleep and are doing those common sense things that aren't going to impact on sleep. But it ain't the answer. It's the sort of first step. Tidy that up. As long as you've tidied that up, right, let's move on to the next things, rather than really getting stuck on drilling down on sleep hygiene.
Yeah, so sleep hygiene can kind of be like a first step to improving that sleep.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you just share some closing thoughts or key pieces of advice that you would like everyone to take away when it comes to addressing and improving sleep?
So, yeah, one of the key things, particularly for young adults, is just recognizing it's a tricky conflict between needing to allocate time for sleep, but also you've got a lot on. And unfortunately, reality is we can't cheat sleep. You can cheat sleep in the short term, but it'll catch up with you, and it'll start to impact function and concentration and performance and all of these things. So, yeah, don't try and cheat sleep. Recognize you've got to pay adequate respect for it. You've got to provide an adequate opportunity. Then when you're thinking about where that opportunity is going to be, obviously you're a bit constrained in terms of your timing because of the time you need to go to school or other commitments. But recognize, am I an early morning type? Am I a late night type? Because we all differ a bit, and try to make sure your timing is as close to what's going to suit you as possible. If you're more a late night type, we'll set that get up time as late as you possibly can to just grab your bag and out the door and I'm gone, and do all your pre-prep the night before. If you're an early morning type, make sure you're in bed, early enough for the time that you're waking up early that you're actually going to be getting enough sleep. So yeah, recognizing that individual sleep preference as well is really important. And then if you feel like things aren't working, yeah, take a step back and say, okay, is there things I'm doing, common sense things that are going to be impacting on sleep? If not, could it be something else? Am I starting to get a bit more anxious if I put too much pressure on myself? And if you can't work it out, next step is go and see your primary care practitioner and talk to them about it, because they'll either be able to give you some tips on, I think it might be this, why don't you work on this, or then refer you on to someone who's going to be able to help out.
Right. Well, I think those are all my questions for today. And again, thank you for being here. So I'm going to link your website and podcast below. And for everyone listening, check those links out if you'd like to learn more about sleep disorders or just sleep in general. And I really appreciate your time and the information you gave today.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning into the Reward Podcast. Before you go, we'd appreciate your support by subscribing, liking, and leaving your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for our next podcast, where we will be joined by a special guest speaker to explore even more about the fascinating world of sleep and psychology.